Good afternoon, members. Welcome back to today's full council. We are now moving on to item 9, which is the Child Protection Committee Standards and Quality Report, and the Deputy Provost is going to take items 9 and 10. Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And yes, we move straight to item 9. I won't introduce it again, but I'll ask the Bill Atkinson, the independent chair of the Perth Kinross Child Protection Committee, to briefly introduce the report. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm pleased to report to Council on the annual activity of the Child Protection Committee. And as you've heard, alongside the Chief Social Work Officer report, we've covered a number of aspects of both adult and child protection, as well as other broader areas of social work. The report starts with data performance information, which hopefully provides an analysis of the data across key child protection processes. And we see from that there has been a steady increase, although a reducing increase in cause for concerns this year, but a reduction in other processes, including the initial referral discussions with the police, health and education and social work, child protection investigations, and ultimately the number of children at any one time in the Child Protection Register. This is a complex picture, and without being complacent, our interpretation is that this is a result of early intervention services being introduced by voluntary and statutory services over the last few years, impacting on the need for statutory intervention at a later stage. We base that analysis on some audit activity that we've completed that's included in the report, from feedback from service users and stakeholders involved in those services, and some national data which is also starting to support this. But we do need to be cautious, and we'll continue to audit around this important area of work as part of our planned self-evaluation programme for next year and the coming years. As you're all aware, the greatest resource in relation to high standards of child protection work is having confident and competent practitioners across various agencies. To support this, we've updated and introduced new guidance around key areas of work, including transitions, dealing with young people who pose a risk to themselves and others, and we've also updated some of our existing guidance. We've also further developed a programme of training and development, including introducing a community of practice approach this year, which has been successfully evaluated by staff. We've also been involved across Tayside in the introduction as part of a national programme of Skim and Bairns Hoose model of interviewing and supporting children and young people through the disclosure process in as therapeutic way as possible. Again, this has been strongly evaluated both by staff and by the families concerned. Strong partnership working is at the heart of child protection work, and we benefit from an effective Chief Officer group led by our Chief Executive, who oversees the work of the Child Protection Committee within a developing public protection approach in Perth and Kinross, which we strongly support. Although the report reflects on activity over the last year, it also looks forward through its improvement plan to how we prioritise work for next year and the coming years. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Aaron Singh as our Chief Social Work Officer and Julie Baker as our Child Protection Coordinator for their support over the last year, and particularly for Julie for completing and compiling the details on which this report is based. We're all here and happy to answer any questions or comments from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And if, Bill, in the first instance, I can refer questions to you and you can perhaps field them out as necessary to the individual who will reply. First question, Bailey Michael Williamson. Thank you. Mike.
Thank you very much. My question refers to Appendix 1, point 9, which is referrals to the reporter by our services. And you outlined in your introduction that there has been an increase in the number of referrals through education. So I was wondering what additional training is being given to staff to help identify children at risk.
Thanks for that question, Billy Williams. So I'm going to ask Julie to come forward and maybe give you some detail of some of that training that you referred to.
Thank you for the question. So we work very closely with the Wellbeing and Inclusion Officer for the Education Service, and we're involved in the Child Protection Officer Network, where we give information each time about recognising child abuse or neglect and how people should respond to that. So we'll continue to do that and to offer opportunities for our education colleagues to participate in child protection training, including our community of practice events that are targeted in recognition and response to child abuse and neglect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Liz Barrett. Liz.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question is about recording of data. We know that the need for more timely and consistent recording of information about child cases has been highlighted more than once, and in previous reports on child protection as an area for improvement, including for cases referred to the multi-agency screening hub and risk assessments and protection plans. And clearly, prompt and effective case recording across agencies and partners is crucial in ensuring that our young people are properly protected and cared for. But it does look as if the action on this is slipping. Action 5.2 on page 337 in the plan is showing as green, but the practice guidance was due to be in place by March this year, 2024, and it's being pushed out to 2025-26. Could you confirm what's in place in the meantime so that we can have confidence that recording is consistent and timely? Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. You'll see from a number of the audits, I'm just going to answer the question in general terms and ask for some specifics from Julie, who I'm sure is able to give you some of the detail you're looking for. You'll see from a number of the audits that we've done that actually what we're picking up is that recording, you're absolutely right, we do need to work particularly in the longer term plans for young people, making sure that we're keeping them up to date, reviewing them properly, integrating information from other agencies. In terms of immediate response, the data and the audit work that we've done, I can assure you, clearly shows that aspect of the work is delivered at a high standard, and that there's no concerns around about information sharing at that particular point. Julie will come in a minute. In terms of general, and you're right to pick up in some aspects of the improvement plan, there has been some slippage. There's a number of reasons for that. In some of the actions, it's to do with us waiting for further guidance from the Scottish Government. There's also been a big turnover in staff and membership of the Child Protection Committee, including Julie and Aaron, and Sheena has, as you know, recently left. And that's affected our ability to maintain the pace in which we would have wanted to do in some of these actions. But I'll just ask Julie to come up in specific terms to respond to the particular issue about what we're doing in the meantime.
All right, can you hear me okay now? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so thank you for the question. What I can do is provide reassurance that in terms of recording, all child protection contacts and referrals are immediately recorded. and those are monitored really closely. In terms of assessment for child protection cases, we would be requesting reports within 21 days of those incidents to look at child protection planning meeting. So in terms of the recording required for child protection, I think that we have reassurance around that, particularly from our audit activity as well. I think in terms of wellbeing concerns, when we have referrals, for example, to the multi-agency screening hub, which happens weekly, those are tracked very carefully as well through, there's an Excel spreadsheet that makes sure that all of those are picked up and looked at and recorded timeously as well. So we have work to do, and as part of that, we are looking at further developing recording guidance within our social work governance group, which has just started, and I think we'll be on track to get guidance properly in place within the next period.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I have a question similar to Bailey Williamson's, referring to section 9, and while you partially answer it in the discussion, I just wanted to just see if you have any thoughts on this. I noticed the referral made by services has kind of changed quite a lot within the subcategories, and in particular education referrals has gone up by almost doubled. Would you think that is maybe due to just better kind of monitoring by the education service, or it's a post-COVID issue, or something related to that? Thanks.
I think, as we touched on earlier in response to, I think, a question that Aaron responded to, we're certainly seeing older children still having issues as a result, mental health and other issues as a result, as we come out of COVID, and education staff are well trained to be able to pick that up. Certainly they find it difficult to deal with, and it's challenging to deal with, and we've been working on that, particularly around mental health, suicide, isolation, etc. And there's a number of areas of work that the CPC has been looking on, led by our education colleagues, and particularly Stephen Sweeney, who's been supporting education around some of these issues. So I think that's certainly one of the areas why we're seeing an increase in referral of cause for concerns through education, and we're comfortable with that, because we would rather, as we would say, for both child and adult protection, have information in where there's a cause for concern and start that discussion on an interagency basis if that's appropriate as early as we can. So we welcome that.
Thank you. And now, Councillor McPherson, if you'd like to go for both your questions, since I see no others. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just lost that. My two questions relate to the bottom of page 259. There's a statement that says children and family social work is transitioning to a new database for recording called Mosaic, and that's going to occur in the near future. I just wonder, is Mosaic a tried and tested platform that's been used elsewhere, or if it's a bespoke, is it envisaged that there will be possible difficulties with the transition, as often typical with the adoption of new software systems? And also just referring to the sentence where it says it's going to be it's envisaged that it will be adopted in the near future. I know elsewhere in the report it says that it was going to go live in summer 24. So I just wonder if you can be more specific in terms of providing a date when that's actually going to happen. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the question, and I'm going to ask Jackie or Aaron to respond to it, as it's a social work information and data system.
Thank you very much, and thanks for highlighting that. The implementation of Mosaic has been, the date for go live is now mid-February, and it's safe to say that it is a system that is tried and tested and used in a number of local authorities as the social work and social care database, both in Scotland and further afield.
But there are elements of that that are entirely bespoke and have been developed along with the developers for our specific purposes in Perth and Kinross. And there's been a huge amount of activity across all our social work teams to ensure that this is a database that doesn't just come in and is slotted into place, but actually is absolutely fits with our processes, and we've taken the time to identify practice improvements that we want to take into the new system. And just to give council assurance that from a social work perspective, all of that work is being completed, and the delay to February is as a result of other parts of the system, particularly in relation to finance packages and testing and data migration. But the development work from a social work perspective and the training of all of our staff has been completed, and they're ready to roll with it, so to speak.
Ian, did you have a second question? Okay, thank you. We now move to Councillor Frampton. Ellie.
Thank you. In the multi-agency audit, in the area where it says, what do we need to improve, page 265, there's a part that says losing focus on the young person. That it was noted in several cases that the voice of the young person in records and processes was effectively silenced by the competing needs of the people around them, whether it was by a sibling or a parent. I'm just wondering what has been put in place to ensure that the young person's voice is always heard going forward.
Thanks for that question. You'll see in general terms, I'm going to ask Julie, who undertook the audit, to give you detail in particular. You'll see in generally within the report our greater use of advocacy services, and certainly the commission service that we provide or buy-in from an external provider gives that level of comfort and support that somebody independent supporting the young person is trying to put across their case as clearly as possible to make sure absolutely that their voice is heard. And that's continued and has increased over the last year. But Julie maybe want to say a wee bit more in relation to the specifics of the audit.
Thank you for the question. I think one of the things we're really focusing on in multi-agency audit and all our audit work is about the voice of children and young people. And one of the things we noted that where you have these really complex situations that, sometimes the needs of people in the family can overshadow those of the child or the young person. So as part of our response to this, we've been at the social work team leaders meeting to speak about some of the issues that were raised about retaining focus on young people. We're looking, as Bill said, around collective advocacy for young people through the Young People's Forum, Youth Forum, I should say, and also through individual advocacy through our partners at Independent Advocacy, Perth and Kinross. But I think what we are trying to do is obviously through processes and actually through the new Mosaic system, there actually will be a greater written focus on the needs of young people as well. So between sort of individual approaches and I think in terms of how our system is set up, we are working to improve that.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions, and I would therefore ask our council leader, Councillor Lane, to move the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Provost, and thanks to Bill, Julie, of course, for answering the questions so well and succinctly. The Perth and Kinross Child Protection Committee Standards and Quality Report is an annual assurance report that provides full council with details of the extent to which services are keeping babies, children and young people safe from abuse and harm. We have two council plan priorities which focus on the well-being and protection of children. These are enabling our children, young people to achieve their full potential and protecting and caring for our most vulnerable people. This report provides a comprehensive and detailed account of the activity of the Child Protection Committee over the last year. The statistical analysis in this report provides good evidence of how new concern reports are being screened and thresholds maintained for the children who need a child protection response. We can see how services are continuing to work to the Getting It Right for Every Child framework, with partnership work evidenced by the development of the MASH, which provides early intervention multi-agency screening. We can see that the number of children who require formal child protection measures has stabilised from last year, a clear sign that our earlier intervention and prevention approach is having the desired impact. Working with families earlier is preventing escalation into the statutory system and keeping children safe within their families. Our focus on keeping children safe from abuse and harm is steadfast, and we will always prioritise that. We are not complacent that early intervention will always mitigate child protection measures, which is why it's important that we quality assure and evaluate how well we are protecting our children and young people. Continuous improvement work undertaken by the Child Protection Committee is well evidenced in this report, with infographics providing a good way of seeing the key highlights at a glance. I'm sure that I speak on behalf of all elected members today when I thank those senior officers across the partnership who come together as the Child Protection Committee for their commitment and leadership evidenced in this report. This report provides full council an opportunity to gauge the quality of our child protection services, which I feel has remained very positive despite the challenging circumstances of the work they face. Protecting babies, children and young people from abuse and harm is a significant undertaking for our frontline staff whose commitment to getting alongside our children, young people and families and working through the most challenging of circumstances is something I'm proud to applaud. The public also is encouraged to report any concerns about children through the number displayed on our website. It is everybody in here and outside here's responsibility to look after and report any incidents that they feel necessary to do so. And to that end, our child protection duty team and out of our social work service is available to anyone 24/7 on 365 days of the year. Move this report.
Thank you very much. And if I can now call on our Deputy Leader, Councillor Drysdale, to second the report.
Just simply happy to endorse and support everything the leader has said. Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments on this report? I see none. In that case, are we happy to agree the report? Thank you. We now move to item 10 on the agenda, the Perth Kinross Adult Protection Committee Biennial Report 2022-2024. And again, I'll ask if Bill Atkinson would introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm pleased to present the biennial report of the Adult Support and Protection Committee in Perth and Kinross. This report has a statutory responsibility, or the APC has a statutory responsibility to provide a biannual report for Scottish ministers. But in addition, for many years now, we've provided an annual report. So Council previously considered this time last year the first year in question of this biannual report. The trend in the last few years has continued to be one of rising cause for concern reports for vulnerable adults, and an increase in the number of referrals for consideration by statutory agencies. Whilst the majority of concerns involve those over 65, there has been a continued rise in those facing mental health issues. However, despite the rise in concerns being submitted, over 98% of these have been appropriately considered by social work teams within the agreed timescales. I would therefore want to acknowledge the additional social work support that were allocated to this area of work and the additional training, an increase therefore in the number of significant increase in the number of council officers trained to do this difficult area of statutory intervention. In the last years, I think, as we referred to earlier, the rate of increase has slowed down, And as the APC further develops its data collections, we are more able to interpret more quickly the changes in pattern and the reasons for that. Although, as Aaron's referred to already in his report, service design of the access teams to allow earlier intervention, we consider to be one of the main factors. The Adult Protection Committee has built over the last few years a variety of self-evaluation and improvement activities and tools, including audit, data analysis and learning from cases using learning reviews. However, of particular importance over the reporting period was the external inspection of adult support and protection arrangements by the Care Inspectorate, which was published in August 2022. This provides external assurance not only that arrangements in Perth and Kinross are of a high quality, but also that there's a commitment to continue to develop this further through the Adult Protection Committee Improvement Plan, which has also benefited from more concise, focused audit work by the lead officer, which allows improvement actions to be reported and commenced quickly and effectively. Supporting vulnerable adults in Perth and Kinross is not the sole responsibility of the Adult Protection Committee, and over the last 2 years there has been a strong focus on strengthening public protection arrangements across Perth and Kinross under the leadership of the Chief Officer Group. There's clearly significant advantages in improving cooperation and collaboration across issues of common interest, including transitions, training and development, violence against women and girls, and substance misuse. Over the last 18 months, the adult support work has become much more integrated with health, police, and therefore how we seek to safeguard is much more agency, multi-agency and coordinated, including our chronology work, which was an area identified for improvement. Our adult support work and activity is more likely to be a joint social work and health approach. Our initial referral discussions are cutting through the need to inquire and go, if appropriate, straight to formal investigation. And there's been an increase in the use of case conferences as a mechanism to discuss and agree a multi-agency plan, particularly where complexity, and we're seeing increased complexity, exists. Whilst the improvement work of the Adult Protection Committee has been effective in driving up standards over the years, the committee recognises that in this complex area of work, ultimately it's the quality of the practitioners that ensure vulnerable adults and their families get the help they need when they need it, and for that reason, training, development, and support and engagement of practitioners, particularly by the lead officer, has been a major priority over the last 2 years and will continue to be so in the future. In conclusion, it's my view there's been progress in a number of areas of adult support and protection over the last 2 years in Perth and Kinross, but significant work remains to be done as workload and pressures and expectations rise, and the complexity of the cases that staff are involved in becomes also more challenging. Lastly, again, I want to thank Aaron as Chief Social Work Officer and Ian Wilkie, who has compiled this report and the details of this. We're all here and happy to answer any questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you again, Bill, for that introduction. We now move to questions, and the first question is from Councillor Grant Stewart. Grant.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. In page 7, the appendix, we see that you had 6,151 applications. Is that 6,151 individuals, or have some individuals had multiple applications?
Yes, that would be the total number of concern reports that have been sent to us for screening and consideration. They will be a combination of new referrals and also of multiple referrals on the same families. I'm not sure, Ian, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, Bill's absolutely right. So I go back to Mosaic. Mosaic, when we move into it in February, will allow us to report exactly how many referrals we receive and for how many adults that they relate to. So that's a kind of data set that we'll be able to kind of use Mosaic for. That's why I think I support the delay in Mosaic, going back to a question, just to make sure that we absolutely can get it right, because the data is absolutely clear and it's absolutely crucial for us to make the changes that we need to make.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to Councillor Robertson, Willie. Thank you.
Sorry, when a person is identified as being vulnerable, and we try to put a support package in for them, I've known instances where the person has refused support. Could you tell me, and that often causes social problems for people living round about. Can you tell me what the process is in a situation like that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's probably one of the more ethical and tense kind of arenas that we tend to enter into. We've all got the right to make choice and we've all got the right to make bad choice. But at what point does that choice render an adult unable to safeguard themselves? So for a lot of the work that we get involved in, it's very clear that it might be the Adult Support and Protection Act that we might need to use to safeguard them. But sometimes when we find ourselves in that difficult arena of actually someone making a bad choice, we've got to be absolutely assured that we've got the legal grounds to kind of override that choice. And that's not always easy, because what we want to do is we want to work in partnership with the adult. We want to work in partnership with the people around the adult to make sure that actually we can achieve the right outcome. We don't often kind of walk away, and just because an adult might say no, that doesn't obviate our duty of care to the adult, and that doesn't obviate our statutory responsibility. But I think that question there highlights some of the really complex arenas that our practitioners have got to navigate their way around, particularly when the choice becomes a poor choice, becomes unable to safeguard.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. My question is on the Adult Support and Protection Inquiries and Investigations on page 17. And I've read the text and looked at the table and noticed that in the past 4 years, inquiries quite considerably outnumber investigations. And I imagine that is an inquiry leading to an investigation. But for this year, you had a lot less inquiries and a lot more investigations. And is that something coming in, going straight to an investigation without an inquiry? And if so, why have we suddenly got an increase in investigations as opposed to inquiries that has happened over the last 4 years? Something must have changed for it to suddenly flip. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. You'll see in the paragraph above, we refer to the developments of initial referral discussions. We've introduced that over the last 2 years and reviewed that and updated it and developed it with the police. We spoke earlier on about the importance of police. So as we have developed and continue to develop the arrangements around initial referral discussions, that is leading to more cases being referred on for investigation as and when appropriate, without it going through the inquiry stage. So it's actually reducing the number of inquiries that we would be involved in because of the development of a more sophisticated initial referral discussion set of arrangements with the police.
Thanks for that. So there is an increase then, even if you just look at investigations, there's a steady increase over the last 5 years. There must be something leading to that, or is it better investigative work?
Ian, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And although the application of the Act itself is a social work function, over the last 2 years, what we've done is we've made this a much more coordinated multi-agency approach. And as Bill quite rightly says, by introducing, if we receive a referral about an adult today, tomorrow I might have a discussion with colleagues in health to see what information they might have about the adult, and information they might have. And amongst the information that we have, we might decide, actually, let's forget an inquiry, let's go straight to investigation, which is bringing a better, quicker opportunity to get the right people involved to safeguard the adult, instead of actually spending time to go and do that single agency inquiry and then conduct an investigation. So by kind of being more multi-agency in the IRDs, it's cutting through time and allowing us to get to where we need to be quicker than we did before, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that. And we now move to Councillor Mayor Carroll.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Excuse me. I was looking at page 364, the Perth and Kinross population context, where it explains that the P&K area is the 5th largest area by land, has a population of 153,810, which has grown by 14.3% since 1998, compared to 7.9% for the rest of Scotland. The age group 75 and over has increased by 55.8% since 1998, which is a massive increase. And I just wonder, is there an accompanying rise in the difficulties and challenges that are presented to adult protection and social work in dealing with much older people for whom English is a second language? Is that something that you experience? Thank you.
Yeah. Again, I'll maybe answer the general question, and Ian can give you the specifics in relation to that particular group. I think, as you see from the breakdown of referrals, the majority, sorry, not the biggest area of work that we work in relation to adult support and protection is around the over 65s and including the over 80s. But what we're also seeing is a slight rise, but a significant rise because of the demands in relation to younger people, particularly many of whom have complex mental health and other issues. So that's one of the other reasons why we're having more investigations, because that particular group of young people often require a lot of support and across a multi-agency approach. So to answer your question, it is the main, numerically the most referrals we get for adult support and protection is for older people. But there has been an increase in the younger age group, and certainly the complexity of these cases generally are challenging. But I'm going to ask Ian if he wants to respond in relation to.
Yeah, so I'm not going to add to anything Bill said about demographics. One of the bigger challenges that we have had is around challenging cultures. Other people coming in from other cultures who may not recognise what we consider to be risk of harm, that they might not where they have come from. So what we've done, we've been working with local agencies and EOSL, I forget the title about, and they're kind of teaching English. So what we've been doing is spending a lot of time with them to be the eyes and the ears about where they might see risk or how they might see harm, and knowing what to do about it and certainly responding in. But we don't work alone in terms of the Adult Protection Committee or Adult Support Protection work. We work alongside Violence Against Women Partnership. We work alongside community safety people, and we can't do it ourselves, but probably, as Bill has said, there's a kind of growing strength around a public protection approach here, and it's that cross-cutting themes that we're absolutely starting to get right, where this is not one sole responsibility for one sole agenda item. This sits alongside other people.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Sorry about titling you earlier. Just a very quick question, similar to Councillor Mayer's. The numbers of, say, in the vulnerable person report and adult protection and the protection orders you give out, how do you think that compares? I know it's a bit difficult, but to other local authorities. And would you say the numbers you have reflect any kind of practices you've been introduced in the last little while? Thanks.
The numbers broadly are similar, and we're now getting national data information from police and a first tranche of national data across Scotland. Although there's lots of caveats to the quality of that data, but it's a starting point. And Ian and others have been working with national groups to try and improve that all the time. So we have, as we've said, with the caveat that the last year has seen a levelling off, we have seen a rise over a number of years, and that's been the trend for some time, quite a significant rise in some areas. And I think, as it says in the report, we're comfortable with that, because that indicates to us that the message is getting out, not just about those that require intervention, but that a multi-agency response is available, as Ian was describing earlier, to all adults who are vulnerable. Now, that may not be through adult support and protection measures, but it will be through a multi-agency approach to trying to meet their needs better than perhaps we've been able to do so. And national changes to codes of practice a couple of years ago have given us that opportunity to look at this issue in a much more trauma-informed way, rather than driven solely by legislation. So, we're comfortable because we think if the numbers continue to rise, it's because the message is getting out there. There's plenty of work still to be done, but the message is getting out, particularly across other agencies that we work with, about the need to consider on a multi-agency basis the needs of these vulnerable people. And B, we're comfortable that we are able to put together better multi-agency response to deal with the complexities of their circumstances. But we'll continue to monitor, and as the data improves on a national basis, we'll be better able to benchmark with other authorities and learn from them, and they will do likewise with us, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answers to all of the questions. Can I now call on the council leader to move the report? Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Provost, and again, thanks to all the officers for answering the questions and bringing the report to us. The Adult Protection Committee Biennial Report 2022 to 2024 provides an overview of the performance of multi-agency working to protect vulnerable adults at risk of harm. Protecting and caring for our most vulnerable people is a key priority for the Council, and we set that out in our corporate plan. This report notes that we continue to see an increase in the number of adult protection concerns, which provides confidence that there is better awareness between statutory partners, third sectors and members of the public. Whilst older people remain the largest group referred, we are seeing an increase in young adults referred due to complex needs. This is encouraging in a way, as their needs are also being identified and highlighted. This report shows how data is being used to redesign services to provide better outcomes. We can see how continuous improvement remains a central tenet of the work of the Adult Protection Committee, with self-evaluation and audit activity providing assurance and identifying areas that require to be strengthened. The findings from the inspection of the adult support and protection arrangements led by the Care Inspectorate were noted last year, which evaluated key processes as effective and strategic leadership as very effective. This report clearly sets out the extent to which our services are keeping vulnerable adults safe, despite an increasing level of demand and complexity of cases, which for our staff becomes even more challenging. Our increase of council officers to undertake adult protection investigations evidences sound workforce planning, and the promotion of learning and development opportunities provides them with the knowledge needed to undertake their role. I speak on behalf of all elected members again today as I express our gratitude to all the partners that make up the Adult Protection Committee for their continued leadership in this complex area of work and changing environment. The protection of adults at risk of harm requires a workforce that is committed and dedicated to delivering high quality and sensitive support, and this is clearly evidenced in this report. I give a heartfelt thanks again to all the staff involved. Again, I'll reiterate that the public is encouraged to report any concerns about vulnerable adults through our number displayed on our website. And again, to say our access team and our social work service is available 24/7 for all 365 days of the year. Again, I'm happy to move this report.
Thank you. And can I ask the Deputy Leader to second the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. And very briefly, from a personal perspective, my wife and I, having been guardian of a vulnerable adult for a period, and as friends of many of the residents of Capabilities Scotland Upper Springland Complex, I see directly on a regular basis how important adult protection work is for people with disabilities and other vulnerable adults. And I'd like to thank all the teams that are involved in delivering that. I welcome this comprehensive report setting out the professionalism with which increasing and changing demand is being addressed. Once again, thanks to all, and I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments with regard to the report? I see none. In that case, are we happy to agree the report? Thank you, and I'll now hand back to the Provost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Members, we now move on to item 11, which is the Medium Term Financial Plan 2025 to 2031. Scott Walker, the Strategic Lead for Finance and Business Support, is going to introduce the report.
Okay, thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, councillors. This is the latest update of our medium-term financial plan and covers the period 2025 through to 2031. The plan sets out three scenarios: optimistic, mid-range and pessimistic, to provide an indication of the level of financial challenge facing the council over the next 6 years. In the report that was published by Audit Scotland in October this year, and I quote, "Councils have never faced such acute challenges, putting budgets and workforce under severe stretch and strain." They elaborated further in November when they stated that spending pressures have become more acute in recent years and are forecast to grow. Against a background of high levels of inflation, anticipated constraints on funding, growth in the need for services and cost of living impacts, Perth Kinross Council is facing mounting pressure on its revenue and capital expenditure. The council can no longer afford to deliver services in the same way. In setting next year's budget, elected members will therefore determine how best to apply limited resources against the council's strategic priorities and consider different and innovative approaches to meeting the needs of our local communities. One of those innovative approaches can be the endorsement of the council tax strategy, which I'll come back to shortly. Sections 5 and 6 of the report provide an overview of the economic and fiscal outlook. The assumptions used in updating the medium-term financial plan are set out in Section 7 and Appendices A and B to the report. The mid-range scenario shows a potential requirement to reduce expenditure through cuts, transformation and additional income by over £80 million over the 6-year period through to 2030-31. More immediately, the projected budget deficit for 25-26 is currently estimated at £17.4 million. As detailed in Section 7, the following key assumptions have been applied in developing the mid-range scenario. Provision for pay awards has been modelled at 3% from 25-26 onwards for all staff groups.
As staff costs represent around 50% of the Council's net revenue expenditure, there is significant financial risk related to pay inflation. Each 1% movement on pay awards for all staff groups is approximately £2.7 million. The mid-range scenario assumes no increase in core Scottish Government revenue funding over the 6-year period through to 2030-31. Additional funding has been provided by the Scottish Government for pay awards in the current year, but against this background, there is currently no expectation of a significant uplift in local government funding in future years to make further contributions. The Council expects to be notified of its provisional grant settlement for 25-26 later this month, and elected members will be briefed once this information is available. It is also anticipated that the local government finance circular that's issued will only include information for 25-26. The medium-term financial plan also makes assumptions on the financial impact of movements in general inflation, demographics and employee pension costs, on the unwinding of the service concession flexibility, of growth in the council tax base and in fees and charges. The mid-range scenario assumes increases in council tax in line with previously agreed provisional revenue budgets. All assumptions, including those on council tax, are for modelling purposes only. Council is asked to approve the continued refinement of the plan to reflect national negotiations on pay awards, the eventual grant settlement by the Scottish Government, and ongoing work on the revenue and capital budgets over the coming months and years. All elected members were provided with a summary of the previous revenue budget decisions for 25-26 and 26-27 last month. Turning to section 10, this year's update of the medium-term financial plan seeks Council's authority for a 3-year council tax strategy from 25-26 onwards. The Local Government Information Unit recently published the 2024 State of Local Government Finance in Scotland report. This report stated that confidence in the sustainability of council finances is critically low, that times are increasingly hard for local authorities, and that councils are taking every measure available to balance their budgets, raising council tax when they can. However, many councils believe this will still not be enough to prevent the risk of an unbalanced budget. This council tax strategy is essential in ensuring the financial sustainability of the council and protecting or maintaining the frontline services that our citizens and communities value. The council tax strategy proposes annual increases of 10% in 25-26, 10% in 26-27 and 6% in 27-28 as working assumptions to allow for the development of provisional revenue budgets. The additional revenue generated from these council tax increases can be directed towards protecting frontline services, particularly in health and social care, support for children with additional support needs, and tackling poverty. This council faces particular challenges with an ageing population with increasing demand and complexity of need. Paragraph 10.6 within the report sets out some of the very real challenges facing our local social care sector right now. This strategy also aims to mitigate the need for further budget cuts across the other council services that our communities value. The adoption of this strategy will also provide further support for our capital budget. Council has already approved the application of 1% of council tax income towards borrowing costs, but this report goes further, recommending the application of a further 0.25% of council tax income each year to support the capital budget. This will extend the life of our capital fund and enable us to invest in important projects that benefit all of our communities. Table 7 on page 427 of your pack sets out what the proposed increases would mean to a Band D council taxpayer on an annual, a monthly and a weekly basis. In 25-26, a 10% council tax rise would result in an annual increase of £140.37 for a Band D council taxpayer. In 26-27, a 10% rise would mean £154.40, and in 27-28, a 6% increase means an additional £101.91 each year. Colleagues from local taxes and welfare rights will work with residents to support them in accessing benefits and maximising the discounts and exemptions that they are entitled to.
Can all members make sure that their devices are muted, please? Continue, Mr. Walker.
Sorry. So, Provost, I am acutely aware that the Scottish Government budget is about to publish their budget this afternoon. However, it will be another week or so before we fully understand the implications for this council when the local government finance circular is issued. At that point, I'll be able to confirm whether our actual funding is better or worse than our assumptions, and there is an elected member briefing scheduled for the morning of Monday, the 16th of December. With information on actual levels of funding, elected members will have the opportunity to make the final decision on the 25-26 council tax level on the 26th of February, when we ask you to set the 25-26 final revenue budget. At the same council meeting in February, we will ask you to set the indicative council tax levels for 26-27 and 27-28. Again, council will have the opportunity to confirm these council tax levels in February 2026 and February 2027 respectively. Endorsement of this council tax strategy will not mean a reduced focus on transformation and change. The council has an approved transformation and change strategy, and officers remain committed to its delivery. The council tax strategy should create capacity for officers to deliver true transformation with a move away from the annual round of salami slicing of budgets. Finally, the remaining sections of the report include updates on our cash-backed reserves, workforce planning, and an overview of the significant risks to the council's financial planning. Happy to take questions, Provost.
Thank you very much, Mr Walker. First question, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Mr Walker, for your presentation. As we'll all recall, last year, the Scottish Government introduced a council tax freeze for some unknown reason. What guarantees do we have that there won't be a council tax freeze, say this year, next year, or the year after? Because that means that our medium-term financial plan would mean nothing in such circumstances, surely.
So we don't have confirmation of that right now. There is speculation in the press that will not be the case. I know COSLA are lobbying for that position. But when that was introduced last year, there was funding that came to the value of 5%. So right now, you're absolutely right, it is a risk. I'm hoping that risk will be put to bed later this afternoon when the Scottish budget is published.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Scott. Quite a lot there, Scott, and we've got a challenge ahead, so I wish you well with that. I'd just like to ask or point out a few things. On page 407 at 1.2, it says, the purpose of the medium-term financial plan is to provide a clear direction on how the council will manage its financial resource over the medium term to ensure they deployed effectively to achieve council priorities and outcomes. On page 409 at 4.4, it says, given the financial challenges ahead, including economic uncertainties, inflationary pressures, and demographic changes, the MTFP is essential for maintaining financial stability. Then on 411 at 6.1, it says the Scottish Government was due to produce its published and updated medium-term financial plan earlier this year. The publication of the strategy was delayed due to the changes with the Scottish Government and then the calling of the UK general election. If having an MTFP is really, really important and essential, why have we not had one from the Scottish Government? And how does that help us move ahead?
So I can't comment on the Scottish Government's position in terms of the medium-term financial strategy. I am aware of the reasons why it was delayed. I can only concentrate on what we've got, and that's why I think it's essential that I bring a medium-term financial plan to you each and every year. Our auditors expect us to bring it to you as well, and that's why it's here before you today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Scott, for being the bearer of good news, as you always are. So thank you for that. I was just wondering about why you took the decision to bring forward the proposed 10%. And you've obviously read the mood music. You've made it quite clear through your remarks that that's a decision for elected members to take and not for officers. But in my recollection, happy to be proved wrong, you've never brought a figure like this before, and certainly never made a figure like this public. And I'm wondering what your thought process was behind that.
So when Council approved its budgets back in February 24, we had a 3-year balanced budget for 24, 25, 25, 26 and 26, 27. There's been significant changes to that position in that we do on paper do not have a balanced budget. The Finance and Resource Committee are fully aware of the pressures around about the health and social care world that we're now factoring in our assumptions. We're facing pressures in terms of our insurance, a 7-figure pressure there. So we're no longer in a balanced position. This is about being proactive so that we're not bringing forward the salami slicing cuts that we have done in the past. We think this is a much more proactive basis in terms of setting us on a sustainable footing. Because if we get the council tax increases approved today and then approved in February, that generates significant resources that we can divert to protecting the services across Perth and Kinross Council. So this is a change, absolutely accept it, but we think it's a change for the better in terms of giving a direction of travel to our suppliers, to our staff, and to our allios, etc.
Thanks, Scott. And what you've said makes perfect sense. But can I draw your attention to page 428 in section 10.23, which says, for the avoidance of doubt, the council tax increases proposed within the strategy will be confirmed by elected members at the point of setting final revenue budget. That's surely not correct, because we as an elected members may decide to do something different to that.
Sorry, what paragraph were you referring to? Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So 10.23 says, for the avoidance of doubt, the council tax increases proposed within the strategy will be confirmed by elected members. That may be the case, but it equally may not be the case. So I'm just wondering if that's correct or not.
So that is correct. And we'll, if this is accepted today, we'll build the provisional revenue budgets on these increases. You will then get the opportunity in February, on 26th February, to adjust those depending upon what comes out of the financial settlement that we expect, well, today in headlines and next week in terms of the detail for Perth Kinross Council. So you'll have an opportunity to vary them then, yes.
Councillor Colin Stewart, next please.
Thank you, Provost. I'll put further questions in the chat. I just want to be to get the wording absolutely right. In recommendation 3, we're agreeing to earmark a further 0.25% of council tax income each and every year to support the capital budget. But if I take that with section 7.30, under all 3 scenarios, £1 million each and every year is included to support the capital budget. This is funded by earmarking 1% of council tax increases in perpetuity. Do we mean increases or income in the recommendation?
We mean income. So whatever the 1% or 1.25%, if that's what's accepted by council, whatever that generates in income, so cash, that will be applied to the Loads Fund budget each and every year.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Scott. Councillor Willie Robertson referred to last year's council tax freeze, and you referred to putting the council finances on a sustainable footing. If we hadn't frozen the council tax last year and had instead introduced moderate council tax increase of about 6.95%, followed by provisional increases of 6% and 6%, as I believe one party proposed in their budget amendment, instead of being confronted with 10, 10 and 6% in the medium-term financial plan, what would those figures have been?
So had that proposal been accepted of the 6.95, 6 and 6, the year 3, which would have been 26, 27, would have been around 6.74%-ish.
Okay, I think it would have been 27, 28, but I get what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. Leader of the Council, you have a point of clarification.
It was just a point of clarification. for myself really on the answer to Councillor Stewart's question about the 1.25% that would be allocated from the council tax. That wouldn't mean that the council tax would be 11.25. The 1.25 would be contained within the 10%. I think that was maybe the way I understood the question. So if you could just clarify that.
Yeah, sorry if I've misunderstood the question. It's not on top of the 10%. 10% is the increase. The 1.25 would be within that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duff, please.
Thank you, Provost. If I can just touch on the point raised by Councillor Forbes in paragraph 1023. I think, Scott, if you do read it, it doesn't say what I think you want it to say. It does say that the council tax increases proposed within the strategy, i.e. 10%, 10% and 6%, will be confirmed by elected members at the final revenue budget. And that's the meaning I take from that. And I don't think that's what you intended to say. Anyway, my question is on page 418, I think it is, under Scottish Government funding. Whatever we may think of the UK government budget, we know that the Scottish Government are due to get £3.4 billion in increased monies this year, not to mention next year, not to mention the £1.5 billion of monies that they'll receive this year. And by my calculation, that's a 7.7% increase in their allocation. They give us £353 million directly as part of our budgeting, as per the paragraph 7.36 in the table there. If you could do a quick calculation, if we were to receive our fair share of that monies and get a 7.7% increase, what would our allocation go up by? So I'm asking for 7.7 of 353 million.
Can you switch your mic off?
Sorry. So just a couple of things. If the wording's unclear, it's at 10.23. The intention is that council will be asked to confirm, set the final council tax one in February. So apologies if that's not clear. In terms of the question on numbers, 7.7% of the 350 million, it's about £27 million. But in terms of the 3.4 billion, that does include funding for 24-25 as well. So there's 1.6 for 24-25 and a further 1.8 billion for 25-26. We do know that a lot of the 24-25 funding has gone towards commitments around about pay award, etc. So it's probably not all new monies.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Scott, it seems a maybe slightly trivial question given the situation we're dealing with, but on a practical level, by now we would normally be well into budget review group process and we would have at least made some progress. And given that we aren't anywhere near that as far as I can see, is there a reason for that? And when do you think we'll be able to get started on that?
So we're ahead of the game compared to some other councils because you set a provisional revenue budget for 25-26 already. So we're not starting from scratch. We've got the pressures you've already agreed. We've got the reductions you've already agreed. When we get the figures, I'll be presenting to you on the 16th, so Monday the 16th in the morning, and really we'll know where we are in terms of funding, and that's when we really fire the starting gun in terms of the budget review process. And hopefully, I say, if we get this strategy through today, if the funding is better than our assumptions, then hopefully it's going to be a bit easier than previous years.
Chief Executive wants to come in.
Thank you, Provost. And just to add to what Mr. Walker's already said, if this is agreed by Council as a planning assumption for officers, we hope that based on the Scottish Government budget settlement, we hope that will reduce as much as it possibly can the need for us to put in front of you that series of salami slicing options that Mr. Walker referred to earlier on. So with this and with what we hope is a positive settlement from government,
then that's part of the reason why to date you haven't seen that list of options. The strategy intends to reduce that for this year and for the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Allen next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Scott, at some point 4, it says the financial planning purposes. The update to medium-term financial plan includes the following 3 scenarios, and those are presented at Appendix A1, A2 and A3. And just a question to help my understanding. National insurance contributions have just been made slightly different if you want. You've included them in financial pessimism 3, but not in 2 and 1. Can you explain that, please?
So just to be clear, what we've assumed in the optimistic and the mid-range is that the funding comes through, so there's no cost to the council. In the pessimistic scenario, we've assumed there's no funding, which is why there's an extra £5.4 million of costs in the pessimistic scenario.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, Colin Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. Just reflecting on the point about salami slicing and the last comment that the Chief Executive made about not needing to bring forward any proposals. I'm conscious that the leader of the council had asked for a suite of options or a menu of options to be available to councillors so that we could pick and choose between whether we wanted budget reductions in some areas or whether we wanted council tax increases of the magnitude that we're talking about with the council tax strategy. Given we've got the 13 principles in the financial strategy, and that they include delivering services in the most efficient and cost-effective manner, prioritising transformation investment, containing spending within approved budgets, minimising unnecessary expenditure and maximising income, and over-planning for the delivery of savings. Do officers intend to bring forward any proposals for budget reductions in the budget setting process this year? For savings in the budget setting processes.
Thank you, Provost. I'm happy to check, but I think I said reduce rather than not bring any cuts, because these aren't savings. We're not putting money in the bank to kind of squirrel away for a rainy day. These are cutting your workforce. These are cutting the services that we deliver to the public. What we would present, if this was agreed by council as a planning assumption, subject to whatever else we get from Scottish Government, we would build that into this planning assumption and seek to reduce that suite of options that we would present to you to go alongside this as part of a longer term strategy. I would also point out that one of the first things that is set within the principles that you spoke about, whilst you highlighted transformation, and we have delivered millions of pounds in transformation and cuts to council services in the last 3 years that I've been here, the number one on the list is a bit of focus on need rather than demand, and about us looking to meet those needs. And that tends to be our first assumption when we look to bring the option to you as officers. But we will look to minimise the salami slicing, but I can't say that there would be none of those options available, but we will look to try and minimise where we possibly can.
Councillor Cuthbert next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I'm just curious about the timing of this debate because as I'm speaking, the Minister is presenting on the budget. I'm just wondering why we don't have this debate in 2 weeks' time or thereabouts when we actually know the full position, because we've no idea at all what we're going to get from the Scottish Government. So I just wondered why it was decided to go ahead today.
This is the council date that the medium-term financial plan was scheduled to come to. As far as I'm aware, there's no other meetings of council scheduled for this year. This medium-term financial plan is already late, as we allude to. Our medium-term financial plan is already late, as we allude to in the report. So this was the only opportunity to bring this before Council.
Thank you. Councillor Collins Stewart.
Thanks again, Provost. When I turn to the annex, the equality impact assessment is this proposal or this report is assessed as not relevant for the purposes of equality impact assessment. And I think we've had a discussion about that, and I kind of understand officers' position about it being a council tax being a general thing overall the population. But we're talking about a 28.25% increase in council tax over this period of 3 years. When we do have council priorities about tackling poverty, and the Chief Executive referred to the number one financial principle of directing resources to where they're most needed, but the number two one is also protecting the most vulnerable in our community. When you were introducing the report, Mr. Walker, you were talking about how there would, and there's an extensive and impressive bit in the report about the support that the revenues and benefits teams would supply to residents who were having difficulty paying our council tax. Isn't that in itself effectively an offsetting of the negative effects of this policy, and therefore shouldn't there be greater recognition of the negative effects of a 28.25% increase in council tax in terms of the effect that it will have on residents and taxpayers in Perth and Kinross?
So I have sought further clarification from our equalities officer, who unfortunately has been off over the last few weeks due to circumstances, and we will be carrying out an equalities impact assessment on this proposal. I might have suggested it earlier to you privately that that was not required. I was mistaken. So we will be carrying out that equalities with our legal colleagues and our equalities colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I just wondered if you could maybe comment a bit on the Scottish budget process. I think the big difference from last year compared to this year is that we're dealing with a minority Scottish government. When we've had minority governments in the past, the budget process has been much more complicated. The uncertainty has lasted to beyond the budget setting date that this council actually has. So it seems to me that there's got to be, or there is an imperative for us to take planning decisions at this time rather than wait until we discover whether there is a Scottish budget or what it might comprise of. We may get to the situation next year where there isn't a Scottish budget.
Yeah, sorry, so I'm just scrolling through. So we did get confirmation earlier this week of the key dates in terms of the Scottish Government's budget process. And the key dates, sorry, yes, so stage 1 is obviously today. Stage 2 is the 18th of February, and that's really when we will know for definite. And it's confirmed on the 25th of February. So the budget should be confirmed the day before we set our budget, which is different from some other years when we have proceeded it at risk, as other councils have done so as well.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, do apologise, you had a second question.
That's no problem, thank you. My question is just trying to bottom out this 0.25%. It's not 0.25% of council income, it's 0.25% of council tax income. Is that correct?
Yes, it's 0.25% of council tax income.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no further questions, and therefore I'd like to thank Mr. Walker for answering his questions, and I'd like to invite the Leader of the Council now to move the report.
Thanks, Mr. Walker. Give your Sunday name. It seems to be a day like that. You deserve it. But thanks for bringing forward this proposal. Provost, a key component of our financial strategy is the medium-term financial plan, which is before Council today. This Council has a reputation for strong financial management, which has drawn praise from external audit as recently as this week, when our accounts were approved. The regular reviewing and updating of our medium-term financial plan is key to us maintaining that strong financial management. The medium-term financial plan sets out the broad direction of travel for the council and includes high-level commentary on the macroeconomic conditions that may influence public sector funding over the medium term. It includes the best estimates available at the current time, which will undoubtedly be reviewed and refreshed between now and the February of each year when we set final revenue and capital budgets. Provost, I welcome and fully support the change in approach set out by officers within this report. Planning ahead is always a sensible thing to do, even though we have to make a lot of assessments and whilst doing so. This council has already taken hard decisions, which back in February meant that we had a balanced 3-year revenue budget. However, members of the Finance and Resources Committee are fully aware of the factors that mean that we are no longer balanced. There are huge challenges facing the health and social care partnership in terms of the cost of care, increasing demand, and the complexity of the care being provided. We are also aware of the challenges in supporting young people with additional support needs and to our #1 priority of tackling poverty. All of which mean that we are looking, despite the decisions we took, which were horrendous decisions in the whole last February, that we'll be looking for many more million pounds of budget cuts to balance our budget this year. The agreement of this council strategy can end the annual cycle of death by 1,000 cuts. In past years, we have weeks of uncertainty. Our communities, staff and suppliers have spent the winter worrying about future levels of council spend and where the axe is likely to fall. This strategy can end that worry and uncertainty. I fully appreciate that the council taxes sent out are indicative and that we will all get a chance to confirm or change them in February. I remain hopeful that the actual level of funding received from governments is more favourable than our working assumptions, and we'll hear more of what the financial position of income and finance is in the coming weeks. If that is the case, I'll be delighted because that will give us options on how we apply our resources. We can look to change some of the decisions that have already been taken last February. We can choose to stick with the council tax strategy and invest in the services that our citizens and communities value so much. Or we may be able to go with a lower council tax on the back of the Scottish Government funding. That will be the decision of the elected members sitting here today. Endorsement of this strategy is what gives us this choice. Not endorsing it means we are back looking for millions of pounds of cuts in order to meet our collective statutory requirement to set a balanced budget. I also welcome the commitment of officers to continue with the transformation of our council services, which will continue unabated to look for savings and other ways of working to provide the same services we've got that can help our financial situation. And I look forward to the updates when they come to the Finance and Resources Committee. Finally, Provost, it is important to state that this is not the council taking the easy way out. I recognise that officers have been bold in bringing forward this strategy and changing the way that we do things. And it is up to us as elected members to be brave too. This is us as councillors taking hard decisions, the hard decisions that are required. These hard decisions that are required to maintain the frontline services that our citizens and communities want and need, to protect our capital budget so that it can be forward paid and that will not be our children and grandchildren who will have to pick up the costs and that we have on decisions we have made. And it's to put the council on a more sustainable financial footing over the short and medium term. Provost, I really commend this and hope we can get this through today. It is the best way forward for this council and our residents. And remember, we will all have the chance to revisit this on the 26th of February. If we don't do it now, we will all be looking at working on the previous agreed budget setting from last February, and we'll be looking to find millions of pounds more cuts in a difficult situation. I'll move this paper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Leader. Second.
Excuse me. Thank you. Just losing my voice here.
Council tax increase is a bit too much for the Deputy Leader, clearly.
The work. Sorry, the voice. The working assumptions underpinning the Chief Financial Officer's council tax proposals make eminent sense based on what we know right now. The medium-term financial plan is a key component of the financial management strategy of this council, which elected members from across this chamber have repeatedly, lavishly praised and lauded over the 7.5 years that I have been a councillor. As has been pointed out in questions to the CFO, this is a change of approach. Officers say, and I agree, that we need to grasp the nettle here and try to avoid the need for further new cuts to core services in order to achieve a balanced budget. In addition to some of the savings already provisionally included in the 25/6 and 26/7 budgets, which are highly undesirable. And I hope that by a combination of our planning assumption on council tax policy and measures introduced in what I expect to be a pretty decent budget for local government this afternoon, the painful level of cuts every year I have been a councillor can be avoided or minimised. We may even be able to better support additional support needs, and as we have heard earlier today from Aaron, all the work that is being done on social care, plus all the work being done in respect of all our other unanimously agreed corporate priorities. And it should be mentioned that there are council tax reduction measures in place for those least able to afford it. Finally, as Scott Walker has explained, Council will be in full possession of all the facts contained within the Scottish Budget to enable it to set council tax on 26 February at a level it deems appropriate then in all the circumstances pertaining at the time. Happy to second. And I'm away to have another drink of water. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Deputy Leader. Are there any comments? In fact, no, we have an amendment first of all. Councillor John Duff, you have an amendment.
Thank you, Provost. Thanks, Scott and his team for the report. My amendment is a simple one, that we agree recommendations 1 and 3 and delete recommendation 2. There can be no doubt that we face significant financial challenges. However, recommendation 2 to endorse a 3-year indicative council tax strategy for the next 3 years, which is based on an increase of 10% in 25/26 and 26/27, and a 6% increase in 27/28 is premature and comes on the day of the Scottish Budget, which is being delivered as we speak. Whatever we may think of the UK budget, the £40 billion of additional taxes will result in a £3.4 billion increase in the Scottish Government funding. That is a 7.7% increase in our allocation, and that's not taking into account additional funds in this year's finances. As mentioned in the report, local authority funding has suffered over many years as a result of the council tax freezes, the reduction in real terms of the value of funding given to local authorities, and the increasing ring fencing of those monies we do receive. Local authorities must be given a fair share of this considerable increase in Scottish Government funding from the UK Government. We received £353 million directly from the Scottish Government last year. If our share was increased by 7.7% too, we would receive well over £20 million in additional funding. Anything less than a fair share would be a further betrayal of the Verity House Agreement and a failure to treat local authorities with the respect and resources which we need to deliver vital services to our people. Consequently, until such times as we know the outcome of the Scottish Government budget and the contents of the local government finance circular, this council should refrain from making this change to our council tax strategy, and consequently we should reject recommendation 2. I am happy to support recommendations 1 and 3. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Bailey Ahern to second.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm just happy to formally second the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Bailey Ahern. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. Can I first of all just fully support this paper? I think it, and thanks Scott Walker for the work that's been put into this. I think it sets out very clearly the realities, the pressures, the constraints that we as a council do face. Clearly, we don't know all the facts as yet, and indeed the Scottish budget statement today may in itself not be the final version of the Scottish budget come February, because obviously my own party is a minority administration in the Scottish Parliament. However, I think this paper does set out, and I think it does things better than we've done in the past. It sets out a clear direction of travel. It is not stating that the council tax will increase by 10% in February of next year, nor by 10% in February, March of the year after, or 6% the year after. It's setting out basically, it's a planning assumption, it's setting out the direction of travel, it's setting out the trajectory. And I think from that, then we can take where we go from there. And I think it makes the budget process much more straightforward. But let's be under no doubt, we do face quite a number of serious pressures. I'll just quickly go through 2, maybe 3. One certainly is national insurance contributions, and the situation there, I was just looking at the figures, somebody earning 30,000, employers' contributions go up by 30%. It's even more profound on somebody on lower pay. On 15,000, it goes up by 84%. And for the council, that's an implication of 5.5 million. We also have with the ALIOs, and I think it's particularly pronounced with Live Active Leisure. Also beyond that, it also applies to our external suppliers, and you'll get it on following the public pound with groups like PCAVs, Aberlour Childcare Trust, and that is a pressure that's probably only going to feed through later on in terms of increased costs there. And also it's got a wider, that move on national insurance contributions has got a wider impact on the economy, a Scottish economy as a whole, in particular in areas that are lower paid, such as care homes, in particular GP surgeries, the hospitality industry and agriculture. So I think that's something we've got to factor into account. And basically, I think this is, whereas action could have been taken on upper earnings relief on pension contributions, the UK government, this Labour government, has actually really effectively introduced a very severe payroll tax that impacts the lower paid. Secondly, demographics. I think most of us know the situation, but I think one of the most important slides I saw this year came from Jackie Pepper's team, and it's the one that shows from 2011 to 2028, I won't be long, the number of our population over the age of 85 increases by 68%, between 75 and 84 by 45%, and then the younger age groups fall by 10%. That clearly poses major challenges to us as a council going forward, and it's something we're going to have to deal with. And we'll see what comes out of the Scottish budget today, but it's going to be a very important factor if we are going to hold up and live up to our corporate priorities. Thank you. But I do support this paper. I do not think we should move from the actual recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Peter Barrett, is it your point of clarification now a comment, or is it both?
It's both.
It is both, right? Well, I'll take your point of clarification then.
Okay. Thanks, Provost. Couple of things. I am slightly concerned that it appears that it's only women members of this chamber who are given guidance about how long they're to speak for. My point of clarification was it's not clear to me if the Conservative amendment is passed today, and maybe officers know what will the budget working assumptions be. What budget assumptions will they be working under in preparation for the next year's budget and the 2 years provisional thereafter?
Okay, Chief Executive is going to answer your point of clarification, but just on your first point, I have given a number of members guidance on their times today and indicated to them both in public and in private to wind up. I would not want to Councillor Liz Barrett feel that I had picked on her at all. Quite the opposite. I thanked her after she had spoken for being concise in her remarks and complimented her on being very on point. So I felt her remarks were relevant and said that afterwards. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Provost. Just on your point of clarification, officers will use the figures contained within the report in terms of the additional council tax income at a 10% level as our planning assumption for setting the budget that we would present to members in February. If other groups sought to take a different view, then they would be invited to set out how they would look to address the council's setting a balanced budget. But officers will look to do that using those 10% figures.
Point of clarification, Councillor Collins, Stuart now.
Sorry, I thought that Councillor Peter Barrett was asking what the working assumptions would be if Councillor Duff's amendment passed.
So in the case of the Conservative group, if they chose not to support this and bring forward a budget, it would be against the officer budget that would be presented in February. We will build in an assumption that there will be an income figure from council tax at 10%. That will be our planning assumption that we will present in the budget in February at this point. Now, clearly, that's subject to all the caveats that Mr. Walker gave in terms of the Scottish Government budget, but that's what we would be working to as officers.
Regardless of what Council decides this afternoon?
No, if Council agreed the medium-term financial planning, if they accepted the Conservative amendment, then we would need to look at a budget option that was predicated on the 4.9%, I think, from memory, that was set within last year's budget, and look to address any gap once we know what the Scottish Government budget settlement is.
Mr. Walker.
Yeah, just to add to what the Chief Executive is saying, so if the paper is not carried in its format, the 10% down to 4.9, that'll be £5.4 million worth of savings, all things being equal, before we see the settlement that, as a Chief Executive said, we would have to identify.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Provost. Two thoughts. First of all, I don't think anybody in this room should ever forget how hard people work to pay their council tax. And 28% took cumulative over 3 years.
Sorry, Councillor Illingworth. I heard that remark, Councillor McEwan, so I think withdraw it, please.
I'm more than happy to withdraw that emotional remark, although I did find the statement insulting myself.
Okay, well, let's go with withdrawing it. Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Please continue.
Okay, I'll start again. I don't think anybody in this room should ever forget how hard people work to pay their council tax. And 28% over cumulative over 3 years is an awful lot of money that we have to ask from hard-working families. My second point is that this is an indictment of the failure of the SNP government over 17 years, and a government who is always telling us how delivering free this and free that. Well, it isn't free. We're going to have, if we're going to ask our constituents to pay 28% more, then those freebies are not free. So thank you.
Okay, if the Leader of the Council can maybe mute his phone, please. Councillor Robertson next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I have to say, I read this paper 3 or 4 times, and the first thing that struck me was item 6, and I still can't believe it. The Scottish Government didn't have time to draw up their own medium-term financial plan. It did other things to do, other things obviously far more important. I won't list the things that came to mind when I thought that. Incredible. Surely the finances of this country are the most important thing other than anything else. I seem to be living in some sort of parallel universe, in as much as the people that I represent, none of them, I think, will be getting a 10% increase in their income. We all know since Brexit, everyone in Britain at least are £2,000 worse off, thanks guys, than they should have been. So I think everyone's finding it hard to make ends meet throughout the country, and we can see that in our own poverty figures. So I've said to my group, there's no way that I will vote for a 10% without, I just can't imagine me doing a 10% increase in council tax. We have to try and wait and see what the results come from Shona Robinson's budget this afternoon. Hope that common sense has prevailed and they'll start and allow local authorities to deliver the services that we're meant to deliver without posing huge increases on the shoulders of the people we represent. I'd be happy to vote for a 10% increase in council tax if everyone was getting 10% increase in their wages, but that's not the case, and that's this year and next year. I'm not going to vote to make people poorer. I wasn't put here to try and make people poorer, and what you're proposing just does that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson, Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. I would like to thank the Strategic Lead for Finance and Business support for bringing forward the medium-term financial plan. And I think given how contentious this issue could be, I'm grateful to him for his responsible, realistic and professional advice and recommendations. I would say that at long last we have a medium-term financial plan which seriously confronts the financial challenges facing the council, and that it creates a framework using the fiscal and revenue levers available to the council to deliver a route map which will better secure this council's ability to deliver on its corporate priorities to tackle poverty, especially child poverty. And we wait with bated breath today to see if the Scottish budget contains more than warm words about tackling child poverty and actual increases in funding and flexibility for councils to protect and support local residents struggling with the cost of living crisis. I remember through the 10 years of the council tax freeze that we didn't raise council tax by any percent at all, at the same time that wages and pay inflation were going up by 1%, 2% and 3% annually. We have suffered for too long from misplaced party loyalty and support for a decade of council tax freezes from the SNP in this chamber, combined by the Conservatives' short-termist, expedient, low council tax approach and the double whammy of austerity programmes from both the previous UK government and the current Scottish government, all of which has starved this council of the revenue that it needs to deliver the services and facilities that communities need and expect. Provost, any politician can demonstrate 2020 vision in hindsight, but I think it is, once again, worth reminding members of the Liberal Democrats budget amendment last year, and in rejecting Hamza Yousaf's and the SNP's damaging council tax freeze, we proposed a modest council tax increase of 6.95% for the current year, and then 6% increases for years 2 and 3. If that amendment had been passed instead of a medium-term financial plan based on a council tax strategy of 10, 10 and 6%, we would only be looking at minor adjustments to 6.25% for each of the next 3 years to reach the same point as the current council tax strategy will take us. So maybe there might be a lesson there to learn about early intervention. I appreciate that we're not setting the council tax and agreeing the medium-term financial plan, but we are, as other speakers have said, setting the framework and parameters with which we will approach the budget, which, as we've also heard, avoids the salami slicing and the need to bring forward the sort of unacceptable, undeliverable savings options and job losses, associated job losses with those. We must, however, ensure that any significant increase in council tax is matched by increased welfare rights and income maximisation supports. So in closing, I'll say once again, and in supporting the recommendations of this report and not the amendment, if our budget amendment had been adopted last March, we would be facing single-digit council tax increases over the next 2 years and not double digits.
Councillor John Rebeck.
Thanks again, Provost. I'm having my annual frustrations with debate whether what we've managed to beg back for what already ours is generous or not. That frustrates me every year. But I do believe, nonetheless, that this is an appropriate direction of travel. I think it is a better way of doing things in terms of budget considerations. The big caveat, of course, is making sure that those who can't afford £2.70 a week if they're on a Band D are looked after insofar as we possibly can, because there will be people who can't afford this increase. The vast majority of us can, and I'm supporting this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. I don't think it will come as any surprise to members that I can't support a proposal for a 28.25% increase in council tax. When we go back out to our communities and speak to our community councils and groups and residents and so on, if we have to say, well, we're going to increase council tax by 28.25%, people are immediately going to turn around and say, well, why don't you stop wasting money on X, Y, and Z? We recognise that we do this. It is enshrined in our financial principles that we have to minimise unnecessary expenditure and maximise income. We have to contain spending within approved budgets. We have to overplan for the delivery of savings. We constantly hear updates. Great work is being done in the transformation and change programmes across the council in delivering our services more efficiently. But that means that there are currently inefficiencies. I cannot, in all conscience, go out to my constituents and ask them to pay more when we acknowledge that there are inefficiencies in the way that the council operates today. And I was supporting the amendment.
Councillor Jack Welch.
Thank you, Provost. I won't be supporting the amendment. My comment is that I've attended multiple demonstrations by concerned residents around cuts that seem to be being proposed, for example, in library sectors. There's a sense that it's very important that you can go so far but not too far. And I think it's beholding on us to decide where that line is and decide where it's important to ensure we protect services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sheila McComb.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to Mr. Walker for the paper here today. I just want to address a couple of things, Provost, if I may, about the comments that have been made earlier regarding both the proposed working assumptions from the finance team and from council officers and from some of the comments from my colleagues across the chamber here. While I appreciate that a 10, 10 and 6 might not be everybody's first choice, I think we have to acknowledge that a large part of what is driving some of this is an increase in demand. It's not necessarily inefficiencies. The reason we're doing transformation is because we're trying to do more with less so that we don't have to cut services. And so I think if you ask people, can you pay £2.70 more per week, or will we cut back on some of the essential social services, for example, that and the associated healthcare that's delivered by the Health and Social Care Partnership, then you'll find most people who are, and these two services, health and social care, touch almost every single household in our communities. You know, they would say, well, we don't want our services to be cut, so we have to do something. We have to transform those services so we can deliver them within the budget envelope that we have. But we have to acknowledge that there is an increase in demand that limits what we can do in terms of transformation. And the other big area as well is in education. You know, education, there's an increasing demand of additional support needs for children in education that has been widely recognised already. And to try and airbrush that out of the conversation and the considerations, I think, is doing a disservice to the members of our communities who rely upon us to make sure that we can continue to deliver the services that are so essential to them. And so therefore I will be not supporting the amendment, and I will support this paper wholeheartedly. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. I represent Ward 7, and in the last 2 years we've seen the council shut down the public toilet facilities. We're now looking at losing our library service, and the cuts just keep continuing to come. Now, I've got a certain amount of sympathy with people across the chamber here, but we have been let down really, really badly by our Scottish Government. They continue a diatribe of blaming Westminster. Westminster are not responsible for some of the appalling decisions and actions of our Scottish SNP government. Just a few things, I think somebody said that earlier. Ferries, deposit return schemes, kiddie on embassies, independence preparation that's never going to come, overinflated Scottish Parliament staffing. It's easily £1.5 billion that should be available to all councils, including this one. Thank you.
Councillor Ken Harvey, point of order.
Sorry, it's finished now.
Okay, I think we're come to a natural conclusion here. Leader of the council, do you wish to sum up? Sorry, yes, Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Provost. I think everything that has been said is enough. We are of the view that we don't need to take this decision at this point in time, and I would urge members to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Mr. Leader.
Yeah, well, I try to keep politics out of it, but some of the things I've heard here today, when we took over the council here, administration 2 years ago, we were sitting at £10 million structural deficit, and our reserves, our general reserves, were down at 2%. So I'll not take it that we as an administration have not tried to move things in the correct way. And yes, we have had to, because of the finances, look at different way of delivering toilet facilities, look at delivering different ways of delivering other services. And every time we do something, there's a campaign started up by the Conservative group who in their 5 years never took one hard decision, and we've been left to take the hard decisions. And that's where they campaign every time. So that's a bit about the politics. And to say it's all on the Scottish Government, when we look at what happened last year with Liz Truss's and the inflation that caused, we could go on all day arguing backwards and forwards about it. I'm only responding to your initial taunts. Back to this. You're 28%. You're already agreeing with your 1.25% and your 4.9%, up to 18% of a rise already over the next 3 years, if you keep it at that. So it's not 28% against nothing. It's 28% against 18 or 9%, which takes it down at about £1 a week on a Band D house. This is important. I definitely support the paper. I want to form a budget with this in it, and I'll look forward to seeing the people who support this budget with the extra £5 million of cuts to see where they're going to take them from. So I think I'm happy to finish there.
Thank you. I'm just, hold on a second, I'm going to take some. Okay, Councillor Duff, I know that you have a point of clarification. However, the mover of the motion has now summed up. If it's a point of order, I will take it. But if it's not a point of order, if it's a point of clarification, then I'm afraid the Leader of the Council does get the last word. So then we're leaving it there. Is it a point of clarification or a point of order?
I think it could be a point of order. It's in relation. It is in relation to the accuracy of his statement.
I think that then is a point of clarification, not a point of order. It's not a point of procedural order. Yeah, I think if it's not a procedural point, then it's a point of clarification. He gets the last word under the standing orders. We're going to move to a vote. Mr. Hendry.
Thank you, Provost. Members, we're dealing with item 11 on the agenda, the medium-term financial plan 2025 to 31, report by Strategic Lead Finance and Business Support. We have a motion by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Drysdale, to move and agree the recommendations within the report. We have an amendment by Councillor Duff, seconded by Bailey Ahern, to agree recommendations 1 and 3 in the report, but to reject the agreement of recommendation 2. When I call out member's name, if you can confirm if you're voting for the motion by Councillor Lang or the amendment by Councillor Duff. Bailey Ahern.
Amendment.
Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Amendment.
Councillor Frampton.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Cogali.
Amendment.
Councillor Lang.
Motion.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Mayer.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Provost.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Deputy Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Watt.
Amendment.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
Councillor Welsh.
Motion.
And Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Provost, we have 22 votes for the motion and 15 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Hendry. Members, we move on to item 12, update to scheme of administration. Are members happy to agree the proposed change to the scheme of administration as set out on the agenda? Agreed. Thank you. Members, item 13, committee timetable 2025. Members, are you happy to agree the changes to the timetable as set out on the agenda? Agreed. Thank you. Members, item 14, appointments to committees and outside bodies. Council is asked to agree that the membership of the Planning and Placemaking Committee is reduced in size from 13 to 11. I have an amendment. Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Pan. I'm not in favour of reducing the numbers of this committee. I think that the councillors on that committee who should take places on that should be required to step up and take their share of the duties across the council. I think there are a couple of the groups that are short on that committee, and I would like to see them taking their responsibilities up. So I'm not really in favour of reducing it. I would rather councillors took on these duties.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that proposal?
Happy to second.
Okay, we have a competent amendment, and I have a comment here from Ian Massey, Councillor Ian Massey.
I can comment at the end if you'd like, Provost.
Well, I'm currently not expecting anyone else to speak, to be honest, but so you can go now if you like.
Okay then, okay, I will do. Thank you, Provost. As the convener of planning placement, I'm fine with the committee going down to 11, the membership going down to 11. But I'm a bit disappointed that of the 29 members, not one has put their name forward to join the planning placemaking committee, which in my opinion, and I'm sure in the opinion of my vice convener, Councillor Grant Stewart, and the committee members, is the most dynamic, engrossing and public facing committee in the council. Thank you.
Okay, just to keep ourselves entirely right here, since Councillor Duff, normally this would go through obviously on the nod, and since we have an alternative proposal and that has been competently proposed and seconded, Councillor Duff and Bailey Ahern's proposal is technically the motion. I'm going to invite the leader of the council if he would like to propose the alternative. Otherwise, that's going to go through on the nod.
I'm if the convener and vice convener are happy to proceed with 11 members, I'll put an amendment to go with what was put forward first.
Okay, thank you. And a seconder for that?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So we don't have questions and after motions, Councillor Forbes, but if it's point of clarification, I'll take a point of clarification.
Perhaps we could have clarification about which political group is not putting forward the members for this committee.
Mr. Henry is going to provide some clarification on that.
Thanks, Provost. Councillor Forbes, the quasi-judicial committees are not necessarily subject to political balance, and as we always see, council is given a guide to political balance by officers, and it's up to council to decide which groups or which members are appointed to it. If you are looking for information in relation to the guide to political balance, if on a 13 committee, then there would be one from the Scottish Liberal Democrat group and one from the Scottish National Party group.
Okay, thank you. I've got a point of order from Bailey Ahern.
Thank you very much, Provost. I take umbrage at the comments that Councillor Massey just made about 29 other members of this council stepping up to the mark to join his dynamic committee. Some of us in this council sit on quite a few committees, and trying to do another one is just stretching it too far. I agree there are some members that need to step up to the mark, but to turn around and say that 29 others need to step up to the mark is totally incorrect and is wrong.
Okay, before you do respond to it, I think I'd just like to say it's been a long day for everyone. Okay, I think you know, I appreciate that everyone is tired at this point. It's been a long day, and we're going to start potentially saying and reading too much into things. I'm not disputing that members feel unhappy about it, and I'm going to invite Councillor Massey to respond to your point of order. But I think if we can all just take a deep breath, we are nearly at the end of this meeting. Councillor Massey.
Thank you. As Scott Henry has just said, it's quasi-judicial board members. Boards don't have to be political. So yes, I think 29 members, and I didn't say step up to the mark. I said not put their name forward. It's totally different to what Councillor Ahern has said.
Okay. I think I have a comment or a point of clarification from Councillor James. Do you still wish to make your comment or point of clarification, Councillor James?
Please, Provost, thank you very much for indulging me. As a member of Planning Committee, you're also one of the members of local review body by default. So decreasing the number of members on the Planning Committee will actually increase the workload for those people on the local review body. I don't think that's a fair judgment on those people already committing to a lot of committees. So, you know, will we be taking people other than those on Planning Committee for local review body?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett has a point of order.
Thanks, Provost. I wanted to intimate a change to the Liberal Democrat nominee to the membership of the Licensing Committee to replace Councillor Claire McLaren with Councillor Alan Watt. And I just wanted to know what the appropriate time to do that was.
It's fine. I've got that on my list. Thank you. I'll cover that. Okay. A comment from Councillor Forbes, and this will be the last comment, and then we're moving on to a vote.
I just want to agree with everything that we've just heard from my colleague, and I think it's a really valid point. But what we have here is we have a room full of 40 or 38, I think today, people who are elected to be here to sit on committees and make decisions, and we all have a responsibility to do that. And many of us sit on many committees. I think if the issue is with the Liberal Democrats and the SNP not being able to find someone, I think that is their problem, and they just need to find someone to sit on the committee, and then we can all get on with it. I don't have any desire to change the numbers on that committee.
Right. Okay. I'm going to come to the Leader of the Council to sum up if he wishes, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Duff to sum up if he wishes, and then we're going to vote on this.
Yes, thanks. And I think it's down to individuals who want to come. You know, we've got people who are in the building every day and who are on many committees and very involved. And we've got other members who are never in the building and not even at committee. So, but that's down to personal choice, and that's what they're allowed to do. And we've got people here. So I don't think anybody can force somebody to do it. There'd be nothing worse than sitting on a committee that you didn't want to be, or you didn't have the time to do it justice. To put somebody who just comes in and doesn't have the time to commit to reading the papers and be part of a discussion. Being a number or a seat is irrelevant. If you've got 11 people who are, and I know that the convener, vice convener, I know other members from across the chamber are passionate about planning and love being on it. Love being on the local review body and leave them to it. But you can't corral somebody and put them into something that they're not going to do, and they're not going to do it justice because they've got too much else on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor John Duff to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. I think that's a very sad indictment from the councillor about the role of councillors, I would have to say. But I would take on board Councillor James's comment about the impact that going down to 11 would have on the local review body. There are only 3 members sit on that, and if it's 3 out of 11 or 2 out of 10, because Councillor Braun chairs it, that is going to increase the workload on other councillors because we can't get 2 councillors to take positions on the planning committee. Hence the reason why I support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hendry, please.
Thanks, Provost. We're dealing with item 14, the appointment of the committees and outside bodies. We have a motion by Councillor Duff, seconded by Baillie Ahern, that the membership of the Planning and Placemaking Committee is to remain at 13 members with the current 2 vacancies. We have an amendment by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Massey, to reduce the membership of the committee from 13 to 11 members. When I call out members' names, can you confirm if you're voting for the motion by Councillor Duff or the amendment by Councillor Lang? Baillie Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Allen,
Motion.
Councillor Liz Barrett,
Amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett,
Amendment.
Councillor Braun,
Motion.
Bailey Brock,
Abstain.
Councillor Carr,
Amendment.
Councillor Chan,
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert,
Abstain.
Councillor Donaldson,
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale,
Amendment.
Councillor Duff,
Motion.
Councillor Forbes. Motion. Councillor Frampton,
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey,
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth,
Motion.
Councillor James,
Motion.
Councillor Kigali,
Motion.
Councillor Lang,
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson,
Amendment.
Councillor Mayer,
Amendment.
Councillor Massey,
Amendment.
Councillor McCall,
Amendment.
Provost,
Abstain.
Councillor McEwen,
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren,
Amendment.
Deputy Provost,
Amendment.
Councillor Rebeck,
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson,
Amendment.
Councillor Shires,
Motion.
Councillor Smith,
Motion.
Councillor Colin Stewart,
Abstain.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
Amendment.
Councillor Watt,
Amendment.
Councillor Waters,
Amendment.
Councillor Welsh,
Amendment.
and Bailey Williams.
Amendment.
Province, we have 11 votes for the motion, 22 votes for the amendment with 4 abstentions, so the amendment is therefore carried.
Okay, thank you, Mr Hendry. Members, are there any nominations for the vacancy on the Employees Joint Consultative Committee?
Can we ask who, if it's not political balance, but who are the members that are on it now? How many members do we need? Just the same information?
I believe it's one vacancy caused by the election of former Councillor Leishman to Westminster, meaning that, but it's a three members.
It'll be an opposition one because I think there's two SNP members on it, so we're looking for an opposition member.
Province, just to clarify, yes, there are 4 elected members. There's 1 vacancy in terms of the makeup. There are currently 2 SNP members and 1 Conservative member.
Okay. Are there any nominations? If there are no nominations, this item will be deferred for the next meeting. Are there any nominations for the Perth Kinross Sports Council? I'd like to say I'm ineligible since I'm already an ex officio member of the Sports Council. If there are no nominations, we'll defer that item as well. In addition, can we agree that Councillor Alan Watt will replace Bailey Claire McLaren on the Licensing Committee?
Agreed.
Thank you. Members, item 15 is elected member briefing notes. Are we happy to note the briefing notes that have been issued to elected members since the last meeting on the 30th of October as set out on the agenda? Okay, there is, however, before everyone rushes off, there is an item 16 that's not on the agenda, so don't get up just yet. But before that, I'd like to invite Councillor Bob Braun just to make a quick comment.
Thanks, Provost. And in view of the time, I'll be very brief. As members will be aware, during the storm on the 27th of December last year, the intense flooding which gathered on the bridge at Bridgecally caused severe damage to the upstream side below road level. It was estimated by local residents and from the fire service that some 70 metric tons of water had gathered on the bridge from all 5 directions leading into it being the lowest point in the area. Repair works were completed on the 19th of November. There was a removal of all traffic controls and restrictions that had been put in place over the course of the 11 months. This was always going to be a complex repair project due to the siting of the damage, and now that it is complete, and on behalf of the residents of the area, I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank all who were involved in bringing this to completion. to the roads maintenance team in Blairgowrie who came on the day and organised the initial traffic controls, to our structural engineers who attended the public meeting in January to reassure residents over safety and who continued to oversee the project over the course of the following months, at times frustratingly slow and extremely complicated. To the project team, including the scaffolders who put together a complex cantilever design of scaffolding, which was deconstructed and reconstructed twice, and the stonemasons who carried out the repair to the damage itself within a short window before poor weather came in, and went on to install protective flood chutes on both sides of the bridge. The road maintenance team also organised, as a side issue, a meeting with local landowners around the area who took on board the problems and went on to carry out work themselves to restrict the flow of water from their land in future. And finally, thanks to all the residents in the area whose patience and understanding during what was a very long process was very much appreciated. Provost, rightly or wrongly, officers often come into criticism when things go wrong or don't happen as they should. It is therefore right and proper that they should be congratulated and recognised when things do go right. Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the chance to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would now like to move on to our final item, item 16, which is a valedictory for Mr. David Littlejohn, who is with us here in the gallery. For those of you who are unaware, Mr. Littlejohn has been with the council for quite some time and is retiring in the new year. However, this is it's not his final day, as I said earlier, but it is his final council meeting. So this is where we get our opportunity to pick on him. So I'd like to invite Mr. Littlejohn to join myself and representative of each of the political groups to do the valedictory. Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and I think some of Mr. Littlejohn's staff are probably joining online, so welcome to them. So as I said, David has been with the council for a wee while, not as long as some of the people we have dispatched in recent times, 14 years. So a short 14-year stint. And during that time has been involved in quite a lot, to be fair. You know, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was longer than 14 years, David, probably, because you've had quite a lot of major projects in that time, in that 14 years. David was seconded for a few years, I believe, I think across the Tay Cities deal to lead on that. So he has spent some of that time working with our friends in other parts of Tayside, which I'm sure they're very grateful for. He is known by some of his team as Lord Littlejohn, and I had to ask the detail behind this, and I think it's mostly just because apparently you give off a rather posh impression, and you like nice things apparently, which is not a bad thing in the head of an economic development department. We want nice things too for Perth and Kinross, so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I believe that nickname has sort of come to hang around your neck for a while, a bit like your robes and chain of office that I'm sure they have got lined up for you for your retirement. We've mentioned that David was in charge of the Tay Cities deal, but also he has overseen a number of major infrastructure projects during his time, not least with the Perth Transport Futures, which is the council's, as we've heard earlier on today, largest capital project ever undertaken. And without getting into all the the details of that, it is an incredibly complex project which takes a considerable amount of leadership and management, and it does predate the starting of it does predate you, because I think it predates when I was born. Actually, I'm told that it first started in the early 90s. So that was when they had milk floats and black and white television and other such things. We've had, in the last couple of years, we've had a number of more closer to home projects here in Perth. Mill Street in particular is something that David's very proud to have been involved in leading, and has been nationally, and I think internationally recognised as well, actually, in terms of success. So he has led on a wide range of projects, but being head of economic development is one of the more complex roles in the council, because you have a number of statutory functions. So you oversee things like planning, which is everybody's favourite topic, and who wouldn't want to be the head of planning, possibly only beaten by the head of legal and governance, who's sitting across here. You get to deal with everyone when they're mad at you, probably. So it takes a certain level of thick skin to be the head of planning, and to do that for 14 years is quite some achievement. I remember being out with, in fact, a number of my colleagues to my left on a trip, and we were out looking at the prospective opportunities that a new national park might bring. Again, this is the wide range of things that David has overseen in his time, and David, although he likes nice things, he doesn't like to pay for them, because I think he tried getting out of paying for his lunch. We were all hoping that he was going to pay as the well-salaried senior staff member, but no. He was last in the queue to pay. I think, having hoped that the council leader was going to have put it on his card beforehand. Those of us that know the council leader know there was no chance of that. So. And council leader wants me to emphasise he does not have access to a council card, just for the public watching that think he's frivolous with our money. I'll let you make your decisions on that separately. However, David has been he's worked for the council for 14 years, but you worked in the area before that as well. I seem to recall with Tayside Enterprise, was it back then? Scottish Enterprise. I thought we went further back than that, and has had a long affinity to the area, and been involved. And as I say, it's quite a difficult job, because you do go from that regulatory side, but also across to all those stakeholders who all want different things. So it's a job that you need a flak jacket for, very much so. He is very well known for being a champion of the arts. As we mentioned earlier on, he's known as Lord Littlejohn, partly because he likes to attend arts and culture events, and this is seen as being a bit well-to-do by some of his colleagues. But it's very appropriate that he was given responsibility for arts and culture when we changed our management structure recently, and he has been a strong supporter of that during his time. However, it would be remiss to say that David's slightly delayed departure was going to be allowed to go without conditions. We have put him subject to section 75, whereby if we can't get Cascada to come next year for the Christmas light switch on, he's expected to headline that, since his team oversee the Christmas light switch on. I've already booked him in with Michael and Stuart for that, so we'll best hope that Cascada is available for the reconvening of that. And we've also got an opportunity to remark on some of the other stuff that David's involved with that we don't hear about. So David, as I mentioned, is involved in quite a number of charities, and you and I have actually had a conversation about some of the charity work that you do outside of the council, and I think that comes back to his desire to champion things that often don't get championed. And as I say, sometimes those are popular things, sometimes they're not popular things, but he does a lot of charitable work outside of his life here in the council. And he ran away to Edinburgh a few years ago when he used to live in the Cars, and departed for Edinburgh, the big lights, the big city, as he wanted, to get more involved in some of those charities that he has been involved in. But when he's not in Edinburgh, I understand that he has a fondness for the south of France, and that Lord Littlejohn does like to spend quite a bit of time there, and perhaps will be known as Monsignor Petitjean when he gets there instead of Lord Littlejohn. David, on behalf of all of the council staff, the elected members, both past and present, it's been a privilege to have you work with us. We'd like to thank you for your service here in the council, but also before that in the other parts of the public sector. We wish you all the very best in your soon to be retired life, not quite there yet, when it comes, and I'm sure that we will hear from you, and this won't be goodbye quite so much as we'll see you in a bit. I'd now like to invite the leader of the council just to say a few words for David.
This, but seeing I only knew 2 minutes ago that this was happening today, and I was going to go last and pinch parts of everybody else's speech and cobble it together some way or other. So yeah, been 12 and a half years in the council, and David has obviously been here longer. And I think when you come into council first, you don't really get the chance to know or see senior officers, and they always, well, they probably always know more than you do. But David was very good at making you feel like he knew more than you did. For the first long period of my time, we'd go with an idea or two, and it was like, what are you talking about? You know, a bit like that program. What are you talking about? So you go away, but it's supposed to say nice things. Truthful things. Truthful things. That's why I didn't. That's why I didn't write anything down. I was going to start writing down all the nice things, and I've come up here with an empty piece of paper and no piece of paper. So. No, since you know, you moved on and actually get to know David. David's got a really wicked sense of humour, and he can take a joke and he can give a joke. So I really enjoyed being away in the few times on different trips, and the trip when we went to both down south and up north with the unfortunately unsuccessful bid for a national park. When you get to know somebody and speak to them in the car, it was actually really good humour, and I believe that not the bright lights of Perth will you be doing your charitable status. I believe you're going to be building the Crannog personally and designing it up at the Crannog Centre. So that I'll come up and watch you from the out there in the water, and I'll be sitting on the shore having a cup of coffee. But no, I think when I looked at David's remit, especially his new one, you know, it was, so who's the strategic for that? It's David Littlejohn. Who's the strategic for things that? It actually got down to the stage when they were needing toilet rolls in there, and the toilet, and I'm going, who is responsible for this? It must be in David Littlejohn's remit as well, because he seemed to have such a wide range of stuff to be responsible for, and having a lot of good people working under. And also found David as an officer really responsive if you gave him a question. He was really quick if he disagreed with you, and if he disagreed with you, and he could, he wasn't so quick if he agreed to respond. But I'm only joking there. So I've just made this up. I think everybody in here would have to wish you all the best. And you're far too young to be stopping doing anything. I'm sure you'll have something else that you can do. 6 months in the south of France and 6 months here, David. So just wish you a long and happy retirement. I don't want you dispatched, as somebody else has said. It's a bit final there, so I'd rather you go and have a long and happy retirement.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Duff.
Thank you very much, Provost. David, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you for your long and valued service. As we heard, you've been 14 years with the council, which is roughly, or half that time is roughly how long I've been here. And personally, the first 4 years I was part of the administration, so we worked closer together during that time, and I always valued your input and your advice and your good humour, as has been said there. Over that time, your role has made you central to many of the strategic policies and strategies of the council across the world of economy, development and planning, and we've heard some of these, but things like local development plan, well, you're in your third one now, I presume, economic well-being strategy, all the stuff on climate change that we've talked about today, the Tay Cities deal, which I sit on as well, so we've had a closer involvement in relation to that, and a lot of the key infrastructure projects in my time, things like the Crosstay Link Road, the museum, Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, Perth High School, and the passive house developments that we've brought in Perth and Kinross, which are leading in that sector across Scotland. So I think this council and the people of Perth and Kinross have a lot to thank you for, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege to work with you. I know that in terms of your charitable work, we'll be seeing more of each other as a fellow trustee on the Scottish Crannog Centre Trust. So I'll not say cheerio to you in that sense. We'll see each other across the boardroom table on occasion. So if I can just take the opportunity when the time comes to wish you well for the future. Thank you.
David, Chris Ahern might be best placed to tell us whether 14 years is the equivalent to 2 life sentences, but certainly I think it marks a significant contribution to public service in Perth and Kinross. I was kind of hoping that there might have been some sort of golden handcuff attached to David's contract, which would have prevented him from leaving until we'd closed Perth Harbour, which seems to be becoming a saga of Nordic proportions, or until we'd received some levelling up funding from the UK government, but that might be a life sentence without parole, or even until the first brick of any development at Thimble Row is laid. However, if we haven't nailed down the terms of Serge's contract, then I can suggest that we do some of this in quick order, Chief Executive. Yesterday, I bumped into a few of David's former colleagues. It looked like a trio of troublemakers sitting down to a very liquid lunch in Café Taboo, with an empty seat, apparently with your name on it, David. So I hope you're looking forward to the prospect of dining with Peter Marshall, John McCrone and Ron Green and discussing old war stories. They were unanimous in their view that retirement was wonderful, and I hope yours is too. But if that prospect isn't enticing enough, I can also tell you that former councillor Willie Wilson was at a table nearby, and Leslie Riddick was at the adjacent table, presumably hoping that somebody was going to spill the planning beans to the Fourth Estate. Willie sends his best wishes for retirement, by the way. David, your time at the council, we've gone through some major planning and regeneration schemes in Perth. On the plus side, which means there's a negative side, is the new Perth Museum, if you can get over the shopping centre saga. St Paul's Church, the demolition of the Clachan Bar and Quality Cafe, and most recently the White Horse Hotel have removed another 3 blights on the city centre landscape, and other people have spoken about your contribution to the Tay Cities deal and the Crosstay Link Road, to say nothing of the 3 LDPs. I still have some scars from the Incinerator 2 proposal and Grundon at the Shore Road, the Murray Royal Master Plans and Traffic Assessments, and the St Mary's Monastery development, but I don't hold you personally responsible for those. David, I want to thank you for your leadership in developing Perth and Kinross Recovery Plan, the Economic and Wellbeing Plan, plus numerous visions for Perth City, and wish you all the very best in retirement. Good luck.
Thank you very much. I'll say a few words, but not too many words because the big pile of mince pies sitting behind you. If you are looking for someone to sing at next year's Christmas opening, I can do a pretty good Billy Ocean impersonation. So red light spells danger, one of my favourite songs, so bear that in mind. And the Lord Littlejohn thing was actually Barbara Renton that kind of came up with that, and I just need to get it. It's not I do like nice things, but it was principally because I inherited a house in the Carse of Gowrie, which Angus will probably know, with a large set of carriage lamps up the drive, and that seemed very grand. Provost colleagues, thank you very much for your kind words. 14 years have passed in a flash, and in fact, the almost 40 years that I've been working have flown by, and I guess that's part of the reason why I feel that the time is right to do something else. It seems like yesterday when I first met all the staff of what was the Environment Service, and my boss at the time, Jim Valentine, asked me to say a few words, at which point, for some reason, I wittered on about being an Aberdeen supporter, and that was met with a long, lingering silence. And it's happening again. But, but tonight, Thomas, tonight. But moving on, it was really interesting this morning hearing the Blairgowrie and Breadalbin pupils speak, because I had an inspirational geography teacher at Biggar High School who got me interested in place and placemaking. And it was actually an inspirational Clydesdale district councillor who first suggested that maybe I'd be interested in a career in planning. So thanks to them. And thanks to all of you for your support and your challenge over the years, but actually, thank you mostly for your support. During my career, I've had the opportunity to work with people, businesses and projects actually across the UK, and for that I'm truly grateful. But it's been an enormous privilege to work for the people of Perth and Kinross. And although I probably won't be reading the Courier or Perthshire Advertiser too often, I will keep in touch through colleagues who have become friends, and as others have said, through my new role as a director and trustee of the Crannog Centre. And of course, I am still round for another couple of months to support Serge as he grows into his new role, which is, just as it's the best committee in the council, it's the best job in the council, in my humble opinion. So thank you all again, and I wish you all the very best for the future. Thank you.
We couldn't quite let you go away without something to help you in your castle. So we have. Well, I think you've retired to castle, presumably. So a little gift from us, something to keep you warm in the cold winter nights. And thank you again, David, for all of your service. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much.
That does conclude council today. Thank you.